And we're good to go.
Okay, so the time is 7:01 p.m. on Wednesday, February 17th, 2021. I'd like to call this Anti-Black Racism and Anti-Racism Task Force meeting to order. So starting off with our procedural notes, this meeting will be held electronically as per section 19(1) of the town's procedure bylaw number 622819, as amended due to the COVID-19 situation. The second item on our agenda is the approval of the agenda from our last meeting. So can I please have a motion to approve the agenda? Moved by May. Oh, Mike.
Pardon me, Madam Chair. There was some questions and comments from an email after the agenda was circulated. And so I'd suggest that this motion be amended to include a new business section at the end of the meeting, so those questions and comments can be addressed.
Okay, so can I have a motion to add a new business section to the end of today's agenda? Moved by Mark and seconded by May. Okay. So do I go to the questions or comments on the agenda? Okay, yes. So are there any questions or comments on the agenda from our last meeting?
Just a point of clarification, that is it is this meeting. It's the approval of the agenda for this meeting. The receipt of the minutes is the next item.
Thank you. Any questions or comments on the agenda for today's meeting? My apologies. Okay, so I will call the vote. All in favor? Any opposed? All right, so that carries. So the next item is declarations of pecuniary interest and general nature thereof. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest for today's meeting? Okay, great. So now we're moving on to the receipt of the minutes. So can I please have a motion to receive the meeting minutes of January 20th, 2021? Moved by May, seconded by Councillor Kim. Are there any questions or comments on the minutes from last meeting? Okay, I will call the vote. All in favor? Any opposed? All right, that carries. So we have no delegations this evening. And now we will move on to the matters for consideration. So I think we will start off with the memorandum from the manager of Library Square, Mike.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sorry to interrupt. Our manager of Library Square, Phil, has just reported to me he's having some internet problems. Right now, I don't imagine he will be too long, but maybe we'd like to start with item 2.
Okay. Do we need a motion to change that, or?
I don't think so. I think you can go ahead and start with item 2.
Okay, so we'll start off with item number 2, which is a roundtable discussion about the town diversity and inclusion team. So can I have a mover and a seconder to put the item on the floor for discussion, please? Moved by Tricia, seconded by May. Thank you. So the item is that the Anti-Black Racism and Anti-Racism Task Force comments regarding the town's diversity and inclusion team be received and referred to staff for consideration and action as appropriate. So I believe that this is the part where I hand it over to Tricia to speak on the item.
There we go, unmute. Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to bring up and discuss the town's diversity and inclusion plans. I know it's a new initiative for the town, so I know there probably isn't much in place right now, but I do think it's a critical program and one that should be prioritized, not just as an HR initiative, so as a business strategy as well. You know, we all know that it's a key piece of the puzzle to dismantling any of the institutional programs that might be in place that might not be intentionally set up to exclude or eliminate BIPOC individuals and companies, but there might be things in place that we can review, systems that we can review that will help with probably a more diverse hiring at the town. I don't even know the breakdown, so I think even just starting there would be really good. And also diversity in supplier programs for the town. So that's really where I want to get started. I know that it's new, so I totally understand if we have to come back and circle back to it by next meeting, but just if there's any updates and information about that.
Keisha?
I can provide an update. So we are in the process of retaining a consultant who will review all of our policies and procedures with respect to recruitments and possibly help us to establish some resource groups within our organization and come up with a multi-year strategy in terms of our workplace diversity and inclusion. So that work, we're just in that process of retaining a consultant. And so we expect that this work will have some kind of strategy or roadmap in place by June of this year. And we can certainly share that and even engage with this committee once we retain that consultant.
Trisha?
Madam Chair, thank you. Thank you for that update. I think that would be really good. You know, we all witnessed a town in Ontario with a very public display of their town's efforts to support Black History Month. And so I think once we have the right people at the table, we will position Aurora to not ever be in a position like that. So thank you for that. Do we have any idea on more like even procurement, like supplier diversity programs? Like, is your D&I consultant going to also look at that angle as well?
Well, it's going to depend on the scope of work that we define in the project charter. We actually have a review of our procurement processes that's underway now. So I could possibly bring this up with the finance director.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much. Looking forward to seeing that for sure.
Does the committee have any other questions or comments? Or would any other staff members like to speak on the item? I think it was just Tasha, but if I'm mistaken, please let me know. Okay, May?
Tisha, is this consultant going to be a full-time basis with the town? Or is this just a consultant that will be just someone that you'll consult with every now and then? Is this a permanent position is what I'm asking?
No, it is not. We will retain a consultant to work with the town and various stakeholders to deliver a strategy, well, identify barriers and gaps internally, and then develop a strategy, a multi-year strategy.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Kim?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I just wanted to first comment that Tricia, that's a great idea in terms of focusing as well on the procurement practice and look at our contractors as well. That's something that I have read about, but it wasn't really front and center in my mind. So I think that's a great perspective. And I think when the consultant does start the work, I think that's one of the comments that should be made. So great comment there. I think one thing I wanted to add was that, the town has started to collect data because, as you know, you need diversity-based data. Otherwise, you can't drive policy or legislation. So you do need a baseline. So we have started doing that, and obviously, that data is collected once a year. So it's going to take, several years to see what that data will tell us. And so we have started doing that. So, I'm happy to share with you guys that we have started doing that as a town corporation. No, I think that's it. But did you say, Tasha, that we did hire a consultant, or we're putting a tender out there?
We're just in the process of, putting together the scope of work, and then also engaging. We've had a few quotes, and so we're just doing a little bit of research, but we do expect to have a consultant, I would say within 4 to 6 weeks, working on this. And the plan is, like I said, the timeline is that they will report to council by June with a strategy. And before that comes forward, they will engage with this group as well. And if I could just add one more thing, that we also have been working with Neighborhood Network, and they have been collecting data across multiple communities and based on diversity and inclusion. And I met with them today actually, and they have offered to present to this group as well and engage with you.
Yeah, and I think we'll probably talk about this more in terms of our task force role and any decision making that is made. So things like motions of this nature, we as a task force, we're not tasked to, blue sky everything and it's going to come straight, completely from us. We are leveraging staff, and we do have resources and consultants. So they are going to do the heavy lifting in terms of what, all stakeholders would like to get out of the investigation. And us as a role in terms of this diversity component is that consultants at the end will give us some options. They may give us a recommendation, or they might just give us 2, 3, 4 options, and we'll read the report and we'll give our input. And as a task force and individual members, will give our input in terms of about the report and which options that we like, or we may not like any of them. So that's with respect to this item is our role. We will get the report back once it's completed, and we will put forth our perspectives on that.
May.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Councillor Kim, what sort of data are you accumulating, and who from the town is accumulating this data that you're talking about?
Through you, Madam Chair, the data that I'm referring to are things like, and you need permission from the individual, of course, things like gender, your cultural background, age, all those kind of things that some may deem personal, but some employees I know, at the bank, they would ask us this question on HR surveys. If you feel uncomfortable, you don't have to answer it, but that's the type of question we're looking data that we're looking for, because ultimately, if we have 50, 30, 20, 10 component in terms of different racial backgrounds, we want to know what that component is, so that we can see what the trends are in terms of hiring practices, in terms of staff makeup. So does that answer your question, May?
Sure, that's good for now. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from the committee? Okay, so if there are no further questions, I'll call the vote. All in favor? Any opposed? Okay, that carries. So I noticed that Phil has joined us now, so I think we'll move back to the item on the memorandum from the manager of the library square around the anti-Black racism and anti-racism task force mural guidelines. So can I please have a mover and a seconder to put the item on the floor for discussion? That was like synchronous. I'm going to say it was moved by Fiona and seconded by Trisha. So the item is that the memorandum regarding anti-Black racism and anti-racism task force mural guidelines be received, and that the anti-Black racism and anti-racism task force comments regarding the mural guidelines be received and referred to staff for consideration and further action as appropriate. So would staff like to speak on the item?
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening, everybody. I apologize for being tardy, internet issues that I could not control, but thank you for your patience. So maybe I'll just give you an idea of what we talked about last meeting and then what we worked on as a subcommittee over the last month. So you will probably recall that we talked a little bit about the guidelines to be developed for this mural in the January meeting. And out of that January meeting, we formed the subcommittee, which included Keenan, Trisha, May, and Newer. And we've met 2 times and we've corresponded by email as well since the last meeting on January 20th. And we think we've come up with the draft guidelines for the task force, this group's review and hopefully approval to move forward with releasing the guidelines as part of a call to artist process at some point in March. So we had really productive meetings, the 2 that we had, and we just kind of went through in real time the guidelines and answered or asked and answered questions as we went through. So I don't know if everybody's had a chance to review them. I'm not sure. I know that they were circulated a little bit last minute. I'm happy to, Newer, or if anybody wants to provide any comments or feedback here, I'm happy to share my screen and go through them. They're 7 pages. We don't have to go through every single detail, but I think there's still some outstanding questions that we didn't answer at the last meeting, and certainly hoping to get the fuller group's comments and feedback. And again, I'm not sure if anybody on the subcommittee wants to add anything further or maybe talk a little bit about the meetings we had. If not, then I'm certainly happy to share my screen and jump right into the guidelines. Does that work?
I think that would be good. Does anyone from the subcommittee have anything to add before we go ahead with that?
Okay, so if you bear with me for 2 seconds, I'll share my screen. What can everybody see currently?
You can see the Word document with the mural guidelines.
Awesome.
So I think that's what we're supposed to see.
That is what you're supposed to see. Yeah, so that's great. Thank you so much, Nira. Okay, so pretty straightforward in terms of the title page. At this point in time, we didn't call the mural anything specific. We just call it the Anti-Black Racism and Anti-Racism Task Force Mural Guidelines 2021. I did talk about this a little bit. I don't want to dwell on this, but certainly I've added myself as the contact for anybody who may have any questions. This language here is kind of specific to accessibility requirements. For example, if there's somebody that wants to receive the guidelines in an alternate format, they can request to do so through me by email or by phone call. So I've just added that as a bit of a disclaimer. I'm going to read just verbatim some of the different sections, and then I don't know, Newer, if it's best to wait to the very end to answer questions, or if it's more appropriate to sort of answer the questions as we go through. I guess I'll leave it up to you or the group to decide, but I'll begin with the project overview. Do you want to speak to that, Newer, in terms of comments back, or procedurally, how do you want to do this?
I'm just thinking of, I guess, Mike's reminder of, keeping our comments to 2 per person. So maybe in that case, we'll just, if we go through the guidelines briefly, and then we'll leave the comments to the end just to manage that.
Okay, and then we can go back up and obviously revisit the section if you want to go back at that point.
Mm-hmm.
So the project overview is very simple. It just talks a little bit about the process of creating, or the idea behind creating the mural. It just talks about that, how on October 20th, Councillor Kim's motion was approved by council to create this mural that represents, and I took this from the actual motion that was brought to council. So that represents Canadians of racialized backgrounds who contributed to the building of Canada. Now I added Aurora just because I wanted to give it the local flavor, and hopefully, be able to unearth some, events and personalities that were integral to the shaping, from the racialized backgrounds that were integral to shaping not just the nation, but also the community here. And then I just added that in January of 2021, the task force formed a subcommittee to oversee the mural project. And we just said that the mural is one strategy that this whole task force will use to promote anti-racism in our community. One of the key sections that I really would love to get some feedback on, and we talked about this kind of at length as part of the subcommittee, is the mural program themes. And if you recall, what we were trying to do with the mural program themes is to provide some precise language for artists to have a sense of what they should be able to produce as far as the design is concerned. But at the same time, we wanted to allow the language to be open enough so artists could interpret that. And depending on their type of art, whether it's more figurative or more abstract and conceptual, they would still be able to find a way to contribute a design by reading these guidelines. So I'll just read this out really quickly. It says the artist or artist-led team. So we've opened it up to either be one artist or a number of artists, is invited to develop a proposal for a mural that will be a focal point and symbol of community pride that addresses the following themes. Celebrates Canadians of racialized backgrounds who contributed to the building of Canada and Aurora, and encourages education and learning around equity, diversity, and inclusion. We can change that to systemic inequities. We can change that to whatever that we want it to be. One of the things we talked about is we don't want this mural just to be a static piece of art, but we want to be able to animate it through the work of the task force to be able to tie it potentially to curriculum or school learning around again, issues of anti-racism, systemic inequities. And so we wanted there to be some component that we could use and leverage for educational purposes. The mural can either be a conceptual interpretation of the themes above or a figurative representation of actual historic events and people that contributed to the building of Canada and Aurora, or a combination of both. Artists are encouraged to think about how their mural can be used to engage and educate the public. And then I just added more here about racism and systemic inequities. So I'll move on, but I'd love to be able, get your feedback in terms of whether you think we could be more precise in terms of dictating actual people and events, or if you think this is enough. Our approach with the subcommittee was that the artists, being I think Councillor Kim, you mentioned that you're not the most creative person, I think, and I sort of feel like I'm in the same boat as you. And so I think, in some respects, it's kind of great to be able to have the artist, interpret something and use their creativity that we may not be able to access ourselves. And again, I would love to hear what you think about that as we return to, when we get to the question and answer period or section. We wanted to say that the mural program is open to individual artists or artist-led teams that meet 3 basic criteria. One is that they basically fill out the application form. That's an online form and submit it. And then they possess demonstrated experience in creating murals or similar public art projects. And this is where we, again, would love to have some feedback, because we said that artists with the skills and experience needed to develop a community art project and who identify as BIPOC will be given priority, although it's not necessarily a requirement. And again, we talked about this at length, because what we thought is, we would love to give priority to the BIPOC community. Of course, that would be the ideal situation, but we recognize that there might be artists out there who certainly have the skills to create something or contribute to, a mural that could speak to these themes that may not identify as BIPOC. And we wanted to leave it open to as many artists to submit designs as possible, so we could actually evaluate all the designs first and foremost. But we did say that, if it came down to one artist over another being equal in terms of how we, evaluated their designs, we would give priority over the artist who identifies as BIPOC. The mural location, this is the last probably main outstanding piece of the guidelines. And I think we knew that there were some conversations, Councillor Kim, and I think perhaps Mayor Maracas had with the property owners at the corner of Yonge and Wellington, the southwest corner, opposite of where the Canadian Achievements mural is now. We weren't sure if that was set in stone. I know it was discussed, but we weren't sure if that was the actual location. So we were thinking that, okay, we can't really determine what the location is at this point. We did talk about different options. You mentioned, and we kind of thought this would be an okay idea to ask, although I'm not sure it's necessarily going to work out. We talked about the side of the armory. We kind of did, a Google map tour of the community, and went through different streets and different locations, and we thought of different spots that might be appropriate. But again, looking for some direction, whether it's from Councillor Kim, Mayor Marakis, or whoever, in terms of whether those conversations have actually taken place and we're wedded to that location, or if we should continue to explore possible opportunities. Again, we can return to that. That's the last outstanding piece that, and once we choose the location, what I will do is go ahead and take actual photographs of that location, and I'll take measurements as well that we'll be able to include in the guidelines. And again, what we're saying here is, the exact size of the mural, even though an artist may say, we're going to make it 10 feet by 20 feet or whatever it might be, it's going to be through a conversation, I believe, with the task force, the subcommittee, and the town, to be able to say, well, instead of being this size, we prefer it to be this size. And of course, that's contingent upon the budget as well, how far the budget's going to get us in terms of supplies and the ability to pay the artist. In terms of the requirements, so in terms of what they have to submit as part of the application form, we're looking for a proposed concept. So this is going to be an online application form. So they'll have the ability to upload JPEGs or different, image files, up to 3 designs. And it can be more than 3 images, but it has to be 3 designs maximum. We also want to hear from them about why they're interested in this project. So there's a fillable form that gives you just 200 words, very short and sweet, that says, why this artist is interested, or the artist-led team is interested in submitting a design. We want a statement from them as well that talks a little bit about, their philosophy behind their work and, describes their work. Again, that's whether they're an experienced or professional artist, or whether they're, somebody who's just starting out. We still want to have some idea of why they're interested in this project and what their work might mean for us. We want a portfolio. Again, we not just design images of what they're proposing for this mural, but we want 3 to 5 images or links to images of past projects if they can provide that. We want an idea of the material and supplies they're thinking of. And then we also want them to elaborate a little bit on the budget. We've kind of dictated further down in the guidelines what the budget is, and that's more or less set in stone. But again, we're providing the artist the opportunity to say, I don't really need X amount of dollars on materials and supplies, and if I can move that over to either my fee or something else, I think we need to be open to that conversation. And then the other one is a work plan. We want a sense of how long they think they need to actually execute the mural. We want references. And we talked about this. And if you recall, Keenan mentioned at the last meeting that, we want to have as few barriers in place that would restrict artists from participating. So rather than simply ask for 3 professional references, we added up to 3 professional or character references. So somebody who may not be an artist may ask somebody they know from the community or through school or work to provide a reference, because they may not actually have a professional reference related to their actual artwork. The insurance requirements are something we're obligated through risk, liability, and just sort of the legal responsibility. I think we mentioned previously that we're going to be able to help the artist get, if they don't already have, or if they don't have the ability to get an insurance certificate or add the town as an additional insured on their insurance, we can provide that through the town at a pretty nominal fee. But again, in order to remove that as a barrier, we want to be able to reimburse the artist for any costs associated with getting insurance. Additional submission requirements, very simple things like it has to be an original piece of art, it has to be appropriate for the location, just sort of different things. We did talk about how neon, fluorescent, or reflective types of colors will be restricted or prohibited. We thought potentially if this is in a busy corridor like Yonge and Wellington, anything that will distract drivers as they're driving, may get in their eyes at night or something like that. We want to make sure that we restrict the use of those things. This kind of stuff is pretty boilerplate from a lot of different public art call to artists that different municipalities have released. And again, up to the bullet point 2, I'll just reiterate the fact that we're open to have either representational, stylized, and abstract designs that will be considered. Designs will be disqualified for a number of reasons. One, it's just not appropriate for the space. doesn't meet the requirements of the application submission. The time frame is unrealistic. Maybe they want 6 months to complete it. That's not possible. We want them to make sure it's original piece of artwork. No advertising. We don't want any advertising. Again, that's pretty boilerplate. A lot of municipalities put that kind of stuff in. Again, no pornographic content, nothing obscene, libelous, slanderous, pretty straightforward kind of legalese. In terms of the selection process, love to get some feedback on this one as well. We simply said that there would be a selection committee, which is standard for any kind of public art process that municipalities do. We said at minimum there'd be 4 representatives from the task force, and we were thinking essentially the subcommittee members. We wanted to bring on an external art professional as well, just have somebody who sort of knows art a little bit more, maybe guide us in those conversations in terms of the selection process. We may be able to reach out to the Cultural Center and see if they're a curator or if they know somebody that they can recommend. A town staff member, whether that's me or somebody else, we thought that might be appropriate. So we set at minimum, because if we decide that we want more, then we can certainly bring more on. I think ideally we would love to have an odd number if, of course, there is, a vote and we have to split a tie potentially. So I'd love to hear about that. In terms of the evaluation process, 25 points for 4 different criteria. The artistic merit of the actual design and how it relates and speaks to the mural themes. We want to know about their, past work and how it might be applicable, as well as their experience. The responsiveness of the design to the location. There's unique things about each location that's chosen. And if you think about the building at the corner of Yonge and Wellington that we're speaking of, there's lots of windows, for example, that the artist would have to take into consideration. So we'd want to know how that design sort of works with the different windows and openings as well. And then just the feasibility of the overall installation. Are they proposing to take 6 months or 2 months? Is the work plan and budget realistic? Those are the criteria that we would use. In terms of the project budget, we were working off the fact that Councillor Kim had mentioned we had $10,000 to work with, which is great. And so we broke it down into 3 different components. There's the artist design and production fee. So this is what the artist gets paid for creating their design and actually producing the mural. Then there's the fee for material, supplies, and equipment, your paint, your brushes, whether you need a ladder, whatever that might look like. And then we had insurance. So the way we broke it down was $8,300. This is inclusive. $8,300 for the artist fee, $1,500 for materials and supplies, and we set up to a maximum of $200 for insurance. And so if you add all that up, that adds up to the $10,000. In terms of the timetable, if we get approval tonight to move forward, then we'll be able to release the call for artists March 15th, we put. Working, through the different stages, it would be out for about 3 weeks. The deadline would be April 9th. We go through a selection process that would take a couple weeks. We would notify the artists in end of April. We'd have an agreement. There'd be some sort of contract or written agreement between the artist and the town. The mural would begin sometime after mid-May. So again, it's weather dependent. There's probably a few little things that we'd have to consider. A road closure permit, for example, considering how close it is to the road, potentially closing off the sidewalk. So those are some of the different logistical things that we would have to take into consideration. So we didn't know exactly when the mural would begin, but we want it to be completed by September 3rd. And then we would have a mural reveal and celebration within the community, September to October 2021. And that could potentially align with actually Culture Days that's taking place in the community as well around that time. The only thing that we weren't entirely sure about in this process is the level of additional public engagement we want to do and whether that will impact the actual time frame. We talked about, for example, if we shortlisted, say hypothetically we get 30 designs and we shortlist them to 5 or 10, there is the opportunity that we could upload those to the town's website or to Engage Aurora, the Engage Aurora webpage, for example, and have a voting process from the community. That's one possibility. The other thing we talked about is that we may want to have sort of an open house with artists that might be interested. So as part, it doesn't have to be mandatory, it could be voluntary, but if you're interested, if you pick up the guidelines, we could say, 1 week after we release the guidelines, the town or the task force will have an open house, an opportunity for artists to ask questions, and for the task force staff, elected officials to be able to answer those questions. And that might guide artists in terms of, developing their design proposal. That's essentially it. The terms and conditions are really straightforward. Again, that's a lot of legalese in terms of, the town will own this piece of artwork when it's done, copyright, language, all those kind of things. And then the last couple bullet points speak to, what we have to do from a public health perspective as it relates to COVID-19. They just have to make sure that certain things are covered there. So that's essentially it. I hope I didn't go through it too fast. I'll go back up to the beginning, and I guess Noor, I'll throw it over to you if we want to open up to the floor. Should I stop sharing, or do you want me to keep the document up?
Maybe you can just keep it up in case anybody needs to refer to a specific point.
Okay.
Okay, thank you for that overview, Phil. I see that Mark has his hand raised.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, it's a little bit quiet, but we can hear you.
I just wanted to provide my opinion on what I've seen, and I had 2 points that I wanted to make. Number one, I'm not sure if I'm in agreement with the idea of having a public review, because we certainly want to ensure that the selection and the mural does certainly reflect the goals of this mural as part of something to help promote anti-racism and anti-Black racism in the town of Aurora. I do like the idea of an artist open house. I think that is a great idea as part of the selection process. The only other comment I wanted to make is that at the very, very, very top of the document, you use the term racialized. I much more prefer the term BIPOC to recognize the need for the mural to reflect, the Black, Indigenous, and people of color in the town of Aurora.
Through you, Madam Chair, if I could just respond to Mark. Thank you, Mark. That's great. Really appreciate the feedback. I will certainly change the racialized backgrounds to BIPOC. I think that's appropriate, obviously. As I mentioned, I took that from, I believe, the notice of motion, or the motion, I should say, that went forward. I believe I did. But if the task force is in agreement with that, I'm happy to change that if that's more appropriate. And certainly the artist open house, I would agree with you. I think it helps in terms of, we've talked about wanting to have conversations with the artists, and in terms of trying to express what we probably can't in words necessarily on a piece of paper. So I think having the opportunity for artists to have a conversation with you as a task force would probably go a long way in terms of, in the end, getting designs that speak more to what we're looking for. So I'll make a note of that as well. Thank you, Mark.
All right, and I saw Councillor Kim had his hand raised.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I just wanted to, I think Phil had a couple of questions, and I just want to answer them, and while I'm at it, give my thoughts. One, Phil, to your question in terms of the location, we haven't confirmed yet, but I'm going to speak to the mayor tomorrow and confirm whether that southwest location, how realistic that location is. Certainly, if we don't have a location, then it makes it harder to go ahead with a project. So I will solidify that hopefully within the next week or so. With respect to the racialized, I chose that word last year when I had a different word to describe racialized or BIPOC, but I was advised by the HR community that the politically correct word these days were racialized apparently. And so I hadn't heard that word used frequently. So that's why that word was there, but BIPOC is fine. And I just want to also clarify that this mural, this wall is going to be, it's a diversity wall. Okay, so it's not just going to have people of color or BIPOC on that wall. There will be people of European descent or white people as well who've contributed to Canada, because we want it to be an inclusive wall, not just a wall with BIPOC, because then I think, especially if we have that southwest corner, I think it's going to look too conspicuous with with the current O Canada mural, with which is more there's more white people on that wall, and then if you have a total just BIPOC wall on the other side of the corner, it actually reeks of segregation in itself. And so my intention through the motion was to have a diversity mural, so it will include all races. And it could also, include geography. Like you notice on the southeast corner, you have Niagara Falls. You have, I think there was a donut even, because it symbolizes our Canadian heritage. We apparently eat the most donuts per capita. The diversity mural will, it can have food if that's what we designate, but it can be people, it can be geography, or any kind of object. In terms of the timeline, there's no, if things don't work out and we don't get the quality of artists, or we feel like we're being rushed, and the quality or what we the information that we hope to gather is not there, then we can certainly extend the timeline. It's like any project that we do at the town, nothing is done just to kind of meet a tight deadline. It has to be done properly, or it's not done at all. So Phil drew up this timeline because we all need a timeline to kind of work towards, and so we'll follow this guideline and see where it takes us. And through you, Madam Chair, to Phil, during the guideline process, Phil, and also I think there's going to be a lot of things that we need to do over the next 4 to 8 weeks, not just develop the guidelines, but I think we also need to, at the same time, because these are not mutually inclusive, they can be done independently of one another. I think we do need to put out the call to artists. We can do that at the same time as we write down, or we complete the guidelines, and as we do with all town projects, we do like to see, what other municipalities or organizations have they done similar projects or work that we can kind of leverage off their experience. And so, if you and staff could look at other municipalities, organizations throughout Canada to kind of leverage their experience, and what worked, what didn't. I think that would help us tremendously. Let's see. Yeah, I think that's it for now. I just wanted to highlight those points. Thank you.
Through you, Madam Chair, if I can just respond to Councillor Kim while it's fresh in my mind. I think, well, first of all, I'll start here with the time frame. And we did add the language here that says that the dates in the program timetable are subject to change at the sole discretion of the town. So it does allow, as you say, Councillor Kim, the ability to change this time frame as necessary based on events as they take place. And if we decide that we don't get the quality of the designs that we're looking for, we can go back out and put in the call to artists out there if we need to. In terms of the themes, I have a feeling that maybe we want to slightly tweak the themes a little bit. As they currently are, as you said, if this is, about is not necessarily about the representations of the BIPOC community, but it could be, more generally about equity, diversity, and inclusion and what that means. I like the idea of geography, events, food, cuisine, portrayals of that and what that would mean for certain communities. I think food and culture, are intimately connected. So I could see that being some part of the theme as well. So I don't know, I feel like we need to change that a little bit, massage it just a little bit, not a lot, but maybe to include some of the language you talked about, Councillor Kim. I think that's it. Yeah.
And through you, Madam Chair, one other comment was that I'm not sure. I'm not sure whether Mark was addressing this earlier, but in terms of public participation in most town projects, especially something that's as public as a mural, we generally like to have public participation, because we found that in the past that if you don't have public participation in some degree or another, you will get some angry residents saying, hey, I did have some perspectives. I had some ideas here. Can I share that? So, I mean, with respect to, what and who should go on the mural, on the wall, I think some public participation or public participation, I think would be a great thing, because it would be inclusive. I think we'll get a lot of great ideas from a broader population, as opposed to just a dozen of us or 6 of us. When you have the whole town who's really interested and themselves vested, when you get the public involved and participating from the get-go, you get their buy-in, and they that's part of being inclusive, right? And that's and being in a diverse society. So I think having public participation is necessary with respect to getting names in terms of who should be on that wall. So that's just my last thought. Thanks.
Mark?
Just to clarify my point, and your point is well taken, Councillor Kim. I'm kind of envisioning public participation in terms of, as you mentioned, that virtual meet and greet with a short list of artists, just displaying their work, whether it's virtual or whether it's physical, depending on where we are. But I'm not saying no to public participation, but I'm thinking about public participation in the context of helping that shortlisted group of artists, develop themes for the art.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Thanks for clarifying. I agree with you there.
So maybe I'll jump in with a couple of comments that I had. Thanks again, Phil, for going over those, and for the subcommittee's work on figuring out some of the nitty-gritty details of the guidelines. So I guess one thing that came up in my mind as you were sharing the guidelines and Councillor Kim's comments was the whole idea of, I guess, when we're talking about massaging out the word or the terminology that we're using for describing the themes, I think it would be important to emphasize or integrate some language around intersectionality. I do think that it is important to ensure that the focus is on diversity, but also people of racialized backgrounds or BIPOC individuals. But I do think that adding in a layer of intersectionality to that is also important, because, well, I don't know if I need to go into detail to explain why that is. I feel like it is very inherent. So I just wanted to note that. One question that I had around artist eligibility, I think on the guidelines it says possesses demonstrated experience in creating murals or similar public art projects. I know that we kind of talked a little bit about this, and I apologize that I had to miss the last meeting that we had. So I might have missed the discussions around this, but I wonder if that is, I guess, a little bit like, I think the wording right now might be a little bit restrictive in the sense that if we have individuals, and I know that we talked about, people applying as teams, where certain individuals on a team might not necessarily have experience creating murals, but potentially somebody else on the team would. So maybe just kind of clarifying the language to say that, and maybe it is already inherent and I need to read it over again. So that could also be one of the issues, I guess. But just highlighting the fact that, and I guess the terminology would just be to make sure that we're not discouraging individuals who don't have experience, with murals. And like if somebody can apply as an individual and then come together as a team or something like that, just to provide that opportunity and not discourage them from applying. So I just wonder if there's kind of a slight modification or like asterisks that we can add to that. And I guess on the same note, there was, I guess, the stipulation that somebody needs to have, or like the artist needs to be able to have insurance. And I just wonder if there's like some wording that we can add there just to say explicitly that that is something that the town can help out with for like young artists who might not be able to get insurance on their own, just again, so that the language in the guidelines doesn't discourage people from applying. I can't remember exactly where it was. I might have to go back and highlight that. And with regards to the public feedback, I do think that that would be an important thing. I mean, I also understand that, I guess, it can be an added challenge just because we're getting more input and more feedback, but I do think it is really important in what we're doing here, and especially in the conversations that we had about like the existing mural and how that was done. I think this would be an opportunity for us to do things differently and actually get the community to provide their input and their feedback and have that, I guess, ownership in a sense of, saying that this is something that we were involved in and this is something that we chose to have displayed. So I don't know exactly what that would look like. I do like the idea of having like a short list and then having people vote on it. But then I also understand that there could be, just kind of thinking of potential scenarios, if people have like their own kind of feedback or concerns about the art pieces, like how do we want to deal with those? Do we want to have, or do we want to allow the community to have the opportunity to share their their expressed feedback with the artist and have the opportunity to like modify the piece based on their feedback, again, just to make sure that the piece in the end is representative of the community and what the community wants and feels is appropriate. And then the one last piece that I did just want to touch on, and again, I may have missed the discussion around this, but I know that in the subcommittee meeting, we had brought up the idea or like the question of if the existing mural could be replaced with this mural, if that was a possibility. So I just wanted to ask if there was any discussion about that. I see May shaking her head, so I'm going to assume that means that it was a hard no. Okay, that's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll just speak to a couple points. First, in terms of the insurance, so I did add a footnote here that just basically says that the artist can, purchase the insurance at a competitive rate through the town, and that they are eligible to be reimbursed for this expense. And there's actually a link where you can go on and you can actually get a quotation to have a sense, even before you put the, your proposal in, you can get a sense of what the insurance would be. So essentially what we're asking them to do is to get a quote to add the town as an additional insured, paid for that up front, and then through the mural process be reimbursed for that. In terms of the artist eligibility, thanks for, I've made a note of bullet point 2 in terms of it being maybe a little bit too restrictive. So maybe, if we meet again as a subcommittee, we can find some language that provides a bit more leniency on that, especially for those that may not have the experience with public art projects in the past. And then in terms of the public feedback and the engagement strategy, the public engagement strategy, I wonder, I'd love to hear feedback on this. We were hoping, obviously, to get approval for the guidelines this evening, but as Councillor Kim mentioned, and we talked about this as a subcommittee, we want to make sure we get this right rather than just, get it done by a specific time. And so maybe we need to take the one more month and meet a couple more times as a task force or as a subcommittee. And one of the things maybe we can deliver for the next meeting is just a public engagement strategy, just some ideas or suggestions of how we might be able to engage the public through this process. One of the things that we talked about as a subcommittee as well, and I think Newer, you missed the last conversation, was about how one of the things that the subcommittee, May and Keenan and Tricia talked about was the ability to use the mural for an educational purpose. And we looked at different mural guidelines. So Councillor Kim, speaking to your suggestion to look at different municipalities, I didn't circulate it to the full task force, but I put together some examples of murals from a bunch of different municipalities. And the guidelines are actually, based on templates from the City of Toronto and other municipalities that have done mural projects like this. So there was one mural that we looked at where they had the ability to actually, different artists contributed different components of it. And you had the ability to actually call a number, pick the extension that was related to the piece of artwork on the wall. And then you would hear the artist talk about their work and why it was important from, a sort of a social justice perspective. So we kind of talked about how one of the things that this task force might be able to do is to work with the artist once the mural is done to come up with sort of an education plan to sort of animate, that in as, a piece of the public space that can be used to teach. So you're not just walking by it and appreciating it as a, a two-dimensional piece of artwork, but it's tied to actual learning objectives and outcomes. So I'm thinking maybe what we can do is come up with a public engagement strategy, figure out, what that would look like, how long that would take, and maybe present that back to the full group at the next meeting.
I think so. Were there any other comments from the committee? Trisha?
No comments, but I want to thank Phil for his guidance on it. He brought really good perspective given his history and his experience, and he let us, listened to us. The collaboration was really, really great. So I just want to say thanks, Phil, publicly.
Through you, Madam Chair. You're welcome. It's been my pleasure. And as I mentioned, I'm here to do what I can to help get the mural done, and hopefully it reflects, the wishes and desires of the task force and speaking to anti-racism. So I'm here at your will, and it's been awesome to be part of these conversations, but also part of the subcommittee as well. So thanks.
And I will second Trisha's thanks as well. Councillor Kim?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I wanted to hold back because I thought there might be others who might want to speak. But my last comment on this would be regarding the public engagement. I think in the last meeting in Phil's presentation deck, there was a public engagement spectrum: inform, consult, involve, collaborate, empower. And I think this would fall along the lines of consult, where we obtain public feedback on the project and our analysis. And I think in terms of how we go about getting the public involved, I think in the past, Phil, we used, through our communications team, we used our town email, we used social media. I think we have a Twitter handle and Facebook, and as well. I'm not sure how it would work with COVID, but if there is an opening, we could use a socially distant with masks and everything, kind of an open house if we really wanted to open up like that, or do a Zoom invite. Make sure that we put out some good background information in terms of what this project is about, and then let them give us ideas in terms of which important, BIPOC or non-BIPOC figure that they would like to have on the mural. So, I'm not sure if I'm oversimplifying it in terms of, because we're just really asking for significant persons or other for the mural. So unless I'm oversimplifying it, Phil, perhaps you can discuss it in the subgroup committee meeting in terms of how we normally do, or how we have done public consultation with other projects. That's it.
Through you, Madam Chair, I will certainly, Councillor Kim, speak with our communication staff and all those different channels that we can use. Social media, website. We have the Engage Aurora now that allows us to do a little bit of sort of interactive kind of engagement through the webpage with the community. Even through the contacts. I know, Mark, you had talked about, you had an artist that might be interested. Keenan, during our conversations, as a young leader in the community, he talked about how he has a strong following on social media, and his ability to reach out to his contacts in terms of seeing if there's any artists within his network that might be able to put a design proposal forward. So I think in addition to using the town's channels, we also have the ability to leverage the networks of the entire task force as well.
Mark?
I just wanted to let you know, Phil, that I have put forth my recommendation to the subcommittee. Thank you.
That's great. Thanks, Mark.
Any other questions or comments?
Newer,
Okay.
Mayor Maracas.
Sorry? Oh, I cannot. Sorry, you were out of my screen. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sorry, I just wanted to add something. I think this is great, and I think we're all looking forward to seeing the mural come to fruition. So, I think great work by everybody so far to this point. I just had a question, Madam Chair, through you to Phil. Phil, you might be able to help me out with this from a procedural standpoint and the process. And I think that there might be a step missing in that timeline because Councillor Kim's motion, where we left it, was the clause was therefore be hereby resolved that staff investigate locations in Aurora for a second wall to celebrate the diversity in great Canadian achievements and report back to council. And so I'm wondering, from a process standpoint, I want to make sure that if we do this procedurally correct, and we don't have a misstep, and it kind of comes back to haunt us down the road. And so I want to make sure that we do it right. So I think that I think it needs to report back to council at some point for council to decide on the second location and moving forward. I think this work is great, and I think it's great to continue it, but I think that at some point we need to get it back to council for them to make that decision.
Through you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mayor Maracas. Yeah, I guess I missed that in the process somewhere. I thought I was intimately knowledgeable of the motion, but thank you for that. We'll certainly, what I will do is tomorrow is I'll put it on the council agenda as soon as possible, and we'll get a report. So essentially what that means is we'll get a report with the guidelines as an attachment and asking for approval from council for the location and all the different details. Thank you, Mayor Maracas. We'll get that done as soon as possible. So with that being said, we'll have to revise the program timetable, but again, I think we have the ability to push it back, even if it's 4 to 6 weeks or something like that. It still allows us potentially to have the mural done before the end of the year, weather contingent, of course. Thank you, Mayor Maracas. I'll make sure we get that done.
Thanks, Phil. And I agree. And I think that you can continue to do a lot of the work that you guys were describing right now that you want to continue doing right now while it's coming to council. So I think that can continue. It's not like we have to pause. So I think there's a lot of stuff that can keep going. And I agree, get it in front of council as soon as possible would be great. The other thing, I know Councillor Kim brought it up, and I just wanted to speak to it because he mentioned my name, and that's the wall over at Yonge and Wellington on the other side, on the west side. The property owner is open to it. We haven't had like a firm commitment, but we can look at solidifying that firm commitment moving forward. Fiona, I was going to say, you know the property owner because you're obviously right there. I personally, I think it's a great location. I think we're right there, Yonge and Wellington. The most eyes are going to be on it. Anyone that drives through our town, it's the center of the town, and everyone's going to see it. And so I think it's a great location for it. Maybe I'm the only one that thinks that, but I'll try to see if we can solidify that as a second location and any other location, Phil, that you want to bring into that report to council. So thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Mark?
I just wanted to clarify one point that the mayor brought up. So does that referral to council, just kind of looking at the timetable that Phil has presented, does that have to occur between April 26th and May 15, or is it something preliminary that's done prior to that date?
Through you, Madam Chair, I can speak to that. I'm not sure if Mayor Marcus, you want. My understanding is that it would be the guidelines and all the details that are covered in the guidelines that would be sort of paraphrased in the report, and then we would attach the guidelines. So I think the approval that we're looking for is for essentially approval to move forward with releasing the call to artists based on the draft of the guidelines that we put together. So, and then the report would basically spell out all the different sections of the guidelines. We are proposing this wall, we are proposing this timetable, we are proposing this budget, and essentially asking for, council to approve that before we go out and choose the artist. Because of course, if we go out and put, the effort into choosing the artist and we have conversations without consulting with the elected officials first, then I think we're putting the cart before the horse. So I would say it's probably something that we'll want to do, it'll probably be the first step, actually, if you look at the timetable here. So the first milestone would be council approval, and then following that would be release of the call to artists following that. So I think if we can, I'll speak with my colleagues and we'll try to get this on the agenda ASAP, but it might be something where the council approval is, hypothetically the end of March. I know March 23rd is a general committee meeting. Whether or not there's room on the agenda, I'm not sure. If not, then it would be the one after that. So I'll speak with the clerk and I'll speak with the CAO, and my director will figure out a time that works. Essentially, it'll push the project back. As I said, it could be a month, but again, I think in the grand scheme of this entire project, that doesn't really impact the final completion date. If we think that, and I know Mayor Marcus should be able to speak to this more than I would, but I know you can't paint when the temperature is a certain, below a certain temperature, but I think we can probably get into November before that, we have to be concerned about that. So right now we had mural completed by September 3rd. Hypothetically, it could be, mid to end of October instead, which I think is still, a great time frame.
Madam Chair, I'll just add it's perfect timing for me because my birthday is October 16th. So it's a great unveiling for my birthday. So thank you.
I'll add that to the timetable.
Any final comments or questions? Okay, so if there are no further comments, I will call the vote. All in favor? Any opposed? Okay, that carries. So the next item is informational items. It says here we have no informational items, but I believe we do. Is that correct, Mike?
We've just added a new /other business section to the agenda at the approval of the agenda. So what I would suggest, Madam Chair, is it's a bit of an open forum type idea where members can ask questions, make comments about different things that are within the purview of the task force at this time, and they'll be recorded in the minutes. And staff will try to answer questions or council as well where possible.
Okay, so is it now open business time?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. So are there any items from the committee? Mark?
Hey, good evening. I was approached earlier this week by the, let me get the name correct, the Newmarket African Caribbean Canadian Association, that they wanted the task force to be aware of an item that was brought up in one of their recent meetings with the Central York Fire Services. They delivered a presentation talking about some of the challenges of diversity within the Central York Fire Service, which obviously, clearly has a mandate to protect both the towns of Aurora and Newmarket. And at the end of that meeting, they just wanted this task force to be aware that they would like to liaise with this task force to eliminate duplication of efforts with regards to the private citizen who brought forth their concern with regards to a lack of diversity within Central York Fire Services. That's it. Thank you.
Fiona? You're on mute.
Good evening, through you, Madam Chair. Thank you so much. Sorry, was someone supposed to respond to Mark before I go on to my questions, or how does that work? How do we acknowledge what Mark just says?
I'm not sure if there was a question attached to your comment, Mark. Was there like an action item associated with that? Did you just want to clarify that, and then we can move on to Fiona?
There's no action item at this time. I just wanted to bring this information that was brought to me to the task force. If there is interest, then perhaps we could bring it up as an item at a future meeting.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Through you again,
Go
Madam
ahead.
Chair. Good evening, everybody. Just a few questions, just because I just try to put them together. We see to the town councilors that are on. Thank you so much for being a part of it tonight. It's extremely important. One of the things that I'm learning, and I actually asked someone to keep me accountable, because accountability is so important. It's easy sometimes your passion takes you where you're not intended on going. So your intent can be great, but the delivery might always be distracting. So as I'm trying to fit into the task force, I am a little bit confused about a few things. And so the first one is I love the idea that we'll have a mural. I just question the part, there's a comment just made where I know this word did not mean anything, but it's what was said, angry residents. If we don't put it public, we will have angry residents. I don't think we have angry residents. I think nothing should be done without the people if it's done for the people. And so therefore, if we're doing something for the people should have a voice. So therefore, it's not because somebody's angry. I think the community want to be informed. And so when I look at that and know that we're going to have a mural, and we have a subcommittee that is supposed to work on the mural, which was fantastic, and it sounds like a lot got accomplished. My first question would be, why then does it take so much of the meeting to still be discussing the mural, where there's so much more around the task force responsibility, that we sit here and still listen to over 1 hour of a task force speaking of the mural. Again, the mural is really awesome, and it's great to drive and see it. Personally, for me, it's not a need because I didn't see the other wall before this came up. So, but yes, it's going to be beauty, and it's going to be great being in the middle of the intersection. But one of the last meeting we have on the 24th of November, one of the task force representative, actually the counselor, says, what we need is that we need to educate Aurora to get more involved. And so when I'm looking at a task force that we say we are putting together to challenge, based on the terms of reference, racism and action and bringing awareness, I see that Black history came up, and it was not addressed by the task force. It was not addressed by the counselor, and the counselor is also not present. And so for me, it's hard to keep quiet, and I'm trying to not say things because I think the task force should be a place where I feel safe, where I'm not feeling like I'm attacking anyone and no one takes it personal. So Counselor Kim, I'm directing this to you because you are the only person of color on the committee. And so I think it was just automatic and only appropriate that you were assigned to the task force, and also appropriate that you would want to see the diversity wall. But Counselor Kim, I'm very, very concerned. And you know, I believe I really do trust you, but I just very concerned that we have this main project as the task force to put a wall. And I don't want to be on a wall. And I know the wall is going to go up regardless of what I say. But I also want to see that the counselor who is fighting for diversity is involved in the small things that he did mention on the 24th to get people more involved. How can we do the simple things that doesn't cost us anything? This wall is going to cost us $10,000, but being a part of Black History Month costs us nothing. It costs us nothing to share a post. It costs us nothing to call and say, how is it going and what we can do? Because these are the small things that we can do to bring our community together and be educated. So the last thing I will say, without taking much of your time, is this. Relationship for me is very important. And this is why I call someone in the team to help me be accountable. I feel that because we're talking about task force, and it's also happening during COVID, the lack of cohesiveness and connection is very impossible to connect. And I think when we put a task force together, obviously we can't assume that we all know each other, and we all don't have the same beliefs and the same value. I know we are chosen because we are BIPAC, I believe, and because the town, and it's an honor to be chosen. And I don't take this lightly. And so one of the steps that I think I would wish I had is a foundational step for the first couple of meetings to educate me, who have never been on a formal town community, how it's done, what to do, what to expect, and get those plays out, because it makes me feel so lost. It makes me feel like I don't know when to ask question, if I can ask question. I'm still trying to understand my role, because so far, except for the first meeting, my role has been to sit here and have something been read to me. And at least, sorry, that's how I get it. I don't speak for anyone else. So this is a very needed task force, but I feel that the last two meetings has only been about the mural, and there's greater things to be done than the mural. We look at where we talk about the procurement, which was addressed from the 24th of November in our first meeting, and it was missed, and it was not followed through on, and no follow-up on it. And so even as simple as we talk about waiting for data, we can look at how committees are built. What is the diversity within the committee? You don't have to be hard as employee diversity, but let's first look at how we build these committees. Who are on them? How does it reflect your town? Because as you know from me, and if you didn't know, my family, I'm more feeling like people are against me that I'm Black. So I'm not against white, because I get called white people by my Black. So when it comes to, I'm not talking about that. I just want to say is that it's very important that we start from the simple things by actually getting involved. So if I missed anything, I'm really sorry, but I'm just saying, I kind of just feel lost, and I just feel like, yeah, I just feel lost, and maybe I'm ranting now, but so I'll stop there. But yeah, sorry.
Councillor Kim.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And it seems like Fiona directed those questions to me, so I'll respond. First, I'm very sorry, Fiona, that I think that your expectations of your role and the expectations of what the task force is was clouded, or that was not made clear. I could take responsibility for that. I thought that I had explained and staff had explained our role as a task force. It's not much different from our other advisory committees, and what the other advisory committees do is, for instance, heritage. Staff will come up with a report because there's some conflicts with respect to some design of a heritage home, and staff will give recommendations, and the committee will be used as they're chosen because they do have some experience and expertise in that field, and through their personal experience and from options given to them by staff, they will make a decision and recommendation. And that recommendation from that committee will come to council to help us shape our own decision. So the task force and the advisory committees are there to help make decisions for the betterment of the town. Now, because the topic of our task force is personal, and it's very sensitive because it talks about human beings and how we relate to one another and how we think about one another. It's a very sensitive topic, so it may be more than just giving a recommendation. And I think it was mentioned in the first or the second meeting that we have the ability to think about new ideas for discussion and to put forward to council to put forth as an action. So from a high level, that's the objective of a task force or a advisory committee. Now, with respect to, you had a few questions in there in terms of the Black History Month. You have to excuse me, and I'm sorry that that went over my head. I knew that February was there was an application by you to staff to have February be recognized as a proclamation for Black History Month. The way I interpret that in any proclamation, we've had a lot of proclamations in the town, and it's simply that. It's a proclamation, which is one statement stating we're going to honor this month to honor this person, this group, or this holiday. That's simply what a proclamation is. And excuse my ignorance, but that's the way I thought of it. And that's the way that we've done it from the town as during the 6 plus years that I've been a councillor. And I think, in talking to the mayor and hearing from you, a few weeks ago, you had more planned for Black History Month. I wasn't aware of that. I think you might have spoken to others, but I didn't know that you had a full month plan. I did not know that. But, like any kind of project, or we want to honor someone or some event, just like the Multicultural Festival, when it first started, it was really just a small, it didn't come close to what I envisioned. It was in Ada Johnson Park. it rained. I wanted a whole bunch of different types of international foods and activities, but based on all these safety issues and health acts and so forth, it was just a small part of what I really had envisioned. But staff told me, what, this is the first year. The first year, it's rarely how you envision it. It'll take multiple years to evolve and get it to where you wanted it. And I think last year or before COVID, we had our 4th or 5th multicultural festival, and it came a lot closer to my original vision of what the multicultural festival would look like. And so my hope is that, based on what I've heard and what staff and Mayor Marakis can speak for himself, but based on my conversations with him as well, I think now that we've had a taste of Black History Month and having communicated with you and others, then we have a base to build for next year. And so I don't want to put a blame game as to why it's not how it was envisioned by you, but I think it was just about expectations and interpretations, because I certainly was not aware of your full scope of Black History Month, and I didn't even know about the proclamation of that prior to joining the task force or the first meeting. So I'm sure you probably have some feedback on that, Fiona. But let me see if I can remember your other questions. In terms of the diversity wall, and I can see how someone who's as passionate as you, and I think everyone around the table is passionate about this topic, because we've all experienced it in some form or shape throughout our lives, and many of us still experience that. I'm sure some people experience it more than others, but we all do. And so it's a passionate topic for us. I didn't join this task force because it's great for me politically. I really don't care about that stuff. And anyone who knows me knows that I don't do things for face value. I do it only because I'm passionate about it or I'm interested in it. Otherwise, I don't get involved. In the first meeting that we had, I suggested that because we don't have a particular topic to discuss at the moment, I recommended to staff at that first meeting, while we are considering other options or other subject matter to discuss in terms of the strategy, in terms of educating the public about racism and so forth, there's already 2 motions, which are my motions, that one's been around for 2 years that we've been working on in the background. I would like feedback from the task force. So let's bring it to the task force and get you guys acclimated as to you guys helping to contribute, make decisions on things that have has a firm base already. And then once we get through these, then certainly other topics of discussion that we can discuss that and call it our own. And that's why I suggested a couple of weeks ago that we have a subcommittee, because in 2 hours we discussed so much that maybe we should have a subcommittee to have new ideas discussed, birthed, and to have some kind of full content and background so that it can be brought forward into our regular monthly agenda so that we can fully talk about it. Because otherwise, if we sit around the room and say, hey, what do we want to talk about next? Let's talk about, Mark's suggestion, what he brought up. We start from scratch, and that's a lot of it might be empty air, trying to grasp it, narrow down what the issue is and how we can do it. So if we have a smaller team to kind of flesh out some of the issues and then bring it to the larger team, maybe that might be a more productive use of everyone's time. So I hear you, Fiona, and I agree with you. I'm sorry that I'm sure you may not be the only one that have that perspective that, hey, we just spent an hour talking about a mural on a wall that I really don't care that much about. Although I appreciate it, it's not something that I came on board for, and I respect that, and I totally understand. But that's the rationale in terms of why we're talking about the diversity mural, why the diversity in the workplace. You know what, if you guys don't even want to discuss that, you know, we can handle that with staff and council. It was just more of, we're here. I'm thinking you guys have a lot of valuable feedback about these two topics, these murals or these motions. Otherwise, you know what, if you guys don't want it on the agenda, we don't have it on the agenda.
Through you.
Keenan,
Pardon? You see me?
I think you had your hand up, right?
Yeah. Okay. Councillor Kim, thank you so much for your explanation of everything. Personally, I was aware of like my role on the committee, and I completely like I understand the meaning of making or having a mural as like the first thing that we do, because at the end of the day, to educate people, you have to do something first. You have to put your foot, take a first step to go anywhere. You can't just hop in there and do things and try to make things happen without planning. And that's what we've been doing. We're planning to make the mural, because at the end of the day, you look, you see a mural on the wall, you're like, wow, great, it's diverse. You can see that, and kids see that. They see that type of thing and they're, wow, I could see this Black person as a doctor. I could see this Black person as another occupation other than basketball, or doing something with sports, or something with a mic, or something even just specifically in Canada. Like, it's all about educating people. And for us to do a mural, for us to stand this whole time for an hour, whatever, however long that we've been on here talking, we've just been trying to plan out on how to do a mural, how to get our first step out there. We're not necessarily educated in this field. We haven't gone to school for it. We don't have the facilities to do things. We have Phil, we have other people that are here that are working as our tools. We are the ones that give the ideas. They're the ones that facilitate the things, but our ideas and our stamp of approval is on everything. So I feel that our role is perfectly fine.
Fiona?
Through you, Madam Chair. Just to clarify, Mr. Councillor Kim, thank you so much for your feedback and your response. Just to correct one thing, when you said you only heard of the Black History Month when you on the task force, I just want to refresh your memory that I believe Mayor Maracas had invited you to the invitation of the call on July 3rd. So we had that call from July 3rd, and in the deputation that I put in, it specifically instructed what we're looking for part of that proclamation. Obviously we didn't know about COVID at that time, but COVID was going on. We didn't know it was going to still carry on to here. But we talk about either the raising of the light or the lighting. The events was there on the 24th, or first meeting. It was also brought up. So Keenan, through you, Madam Chair, Keenan, I hear you correctly. It is great. And like I said, it's not about wanting or not wanting a mural. It's not about whether it takes the 1 hour or not. For me, is that if one person alone can't just understand, or 5 person understand, we have to make sure that everyone is on the same page to be effective, or understand their role to be effective. Therefore, we are carrying on while some are left behind. And that's what inclusiveness is. Hey, are we all have our seatbelts on? We don't drive off that school bus while some people without their seatbelts. Everybody's buckled? Yes, let's go. So, so that was my point. And thank you again, Councillor Kim, for addressing that and for hearing me, because that's what I want to make sure we understand, that we're here and we're not feeling attacked or not feeling afraid to ask. Because if I'm on a task force that's supposed to be dealing with racism and bullying and everything because that's a part of it, and feeling afraid to express myself, then I'm not addressing racism and I'm not addressing the issues that we're trying to be able to demonstrate in our community. So that's what I'm saying. The second part I would add to what you were saying, Councillor Kim, is that I know the task, the role of a counselor is endless, especially now. I know you all working part-time. I don't even know what you get paid or if it's enough. But what I'm saying is that since we took on the role already, and since we know that, Councillor Kim, you are the face of the task force, you're the face of what you're trying to drive, I think it will help you because trust me, it will help you in the community that you're fighting for. because that's basically, you're standing up on my behalf as a Black person. I can't speak for anybody else. I'm thinking of my family. You're standing up for my family. So if you're standing up for my family and things are announced or on the website and then you are not aware of it, then it concerns me, because I'm going to believe that you're following through and making sure that because you're one person and you can't be everywhere at the same time, but that you have a support system that you've created to help you to make sure you're kept abreast of what's happening. So then you can never have to come and say, oh, I didn't know that Black issue was happening, or I didn't know this. Because you can't know everything, and we're not expecting you to see everything, but just finding out, how can I keep myself accountable to the things that I'm fighting for? I did use the example before, is that if I put on the pot on the stove, I can't walk away and forget that to follow the process of finishing the cooking. So starting the cooking is great, but just following through with the process. So again, thank you for your explanation, and thank you for receiving my feedback.
I think May had her hand raised.
Trisha, go ahead. Trisha, go ahead.
Okay, Trisha.
Yeah, sorry. I think this is good conversation. I just don't know if it's the best use of all of our time, and understanding that this also streamed live. Fiona, I understand your perspective, but it seems like this isn't something to do with the entire task force. So I would recommend this is taken offline, just out of respect for the individuals. We're coming up close to 8:37. So I think just out of respect for the time and what we're supposed to accomplish in these meetings, I hear you, but it just feels like we're going a little off track.
May?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, to Fiona, and agreed with Trisha. I think that, Fiona, I know that, I hear you. You want to get going, but we are a new committee and we just starting to build. First of all, it is hard to build relationships when you are doing it through a screen. And I think that we just need a little bit of patience here as we get going. As things come on the agenda, that's how they work. You work with what's on the agenda. And right now the mural is basically on the agenda that we're working and processing through. We can build great strides for the next little while as we go on as a unit and collectively, as a task force here, to plan better for our future events. Next year, we can have a phenomenal month for Black history, and that it was just way too soon for us to get going and running. We don't even know each other as yet. So let's build our relationship now, I think, and let's get going. And I agree with Trisha, let's build this conversation maybe a little privately. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I just wanted to make a couple comments to kind of maybe tie things together. So I hear that there are some concerns about, I guess, the process that we've been going through as a task force, and starting off as a task force, even just kind of understanding what our role is. And also, I guess, what the process is for kind of sharing ideas and turning those ideas into, or bringing them into conversations and discussions that will lead to action. So I guess I think that those are important to acknowledge. And if there are concerns from members of the task force, then I guess I welcome everybody to, share them with the task force, or even I'm happy to receive those comments or concerns privately and bring them up to the task force at our next meetings or in between our meetings, so that we can add those items to the agenda and work on addressing those concerns, because I do think it is important to address them. And I guess also building off of that idea is the whole, I'm using the word idea a lot, but the idea of our ideas for what we want to accomplish in the task force. I know that we are still relatively new, and we've kind of just started out with some key items that came up first, like the mural and like the diversity and inclusion team of the town. And so I think, and I think Mike has done a great job of encouraging us to share our ideas for what we would like to discuss at these meetings. So I think that, we can try to continue doing that. And if there are ideas that we would like to have discussions about for things that we can plan for to accomplish as a task force or bring to the community, like different education strategies. It sounds like that's something that might be of interest to discuss and to kind of take forward. Then maybe that's something that we can share as a group and bring that to our next agenda or one of our upcoming agendas to discuss. And I do think, at the same time, there are definitely limitations of meeting on a monthly basis for a 2-hour time slot. And I guess, again, at this point in time, we do have kind of specific items that we're focusing on, like the mural and like the town's diversity and inclusion team, which take up some time because I guess they require a little bit of discussion in that sense. And maybe that's also an indication that, we need to rethink our processes or have maybe time limits or kind of time recommendations for how long we would like to spend discussing certain items. But I guess I just want to acknowledge that I think that is just a little bit of a limitation that we do have to, I guess, try our best to manage, because again, we're also here on a voluntary basis and there are kind of challenges in being able to review certain documents beforehand for sometimes, and depending on the timelines for when those are, I guess, able to be circulated. I think sometimes, I guess, it's just the fact of the matter that we'll only really be able to review them within this certain time period, which again, might not be ideal, but, and maybe we can try our best to, I guess, find solutions for that to make sure that we're using this time as effectively as possible. But yeah, I just wanted to emphasize, if there are any concerns or ideas or suggestions for how we can do better moving forward, I encourage everyone to send them to me, and I'm happy to bring them up to the group. Were there any other open business items that anyone wanted to bring up? Okay, so then with that, I guess we'll move on to the motion to adjourn today's meeting. So I will move that. And that's seconded by May before Mike has something to say.
My apologies, Madam Chair. Just technically, you're not allowed to move the motion as the chair.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
Sorry, I hate to get procedural at the very end. I apologize.
Okay, let's try that again. Moved by May, seconded by Trisha. Thank you. All in favor? Any opposed? Okay, that carries. So thank you everyone for your time.